I use both the pin stitch and the waist knot method of starting my thread. Which method I use depends on the stitch I'm going to lay. The advantages of the pin stitch are that it uses very little thread, it is secure and can be worked from the front of your fabric. A pin stitch uses 3 holes. The holes could be on the vertical, horizontal or at any angle. Think of a clock face. The stitch can be laid out in any of the positions on a clock. You can make the shape of the stitch fit the area it is to be stitched under. How do we lay a pin stitch? I will use a stitch laid on the horizontal for this demonstration. First, we take our needle down through the fabric. This first hole will become our central hole. Leave a short tail. We will then bring up our needle in the adjacent hole to the left. Now we will take our needle back down the central hole. Try to split the floss you are using when doing so. The next step is to bring our needle up through the adjacent hole to the right. Finally, take your needle back down the central hole. Try to split the floss again. Give your thread a gentle tug. This will lock your stitch into place. Snip off the tail. You are now ready to stitch over the pin stitch. Let's look at the stitch being worked. First, we take our needle down through the fabric. This first hole will become our central hole. We will leave a short tail. Bring your needle up in the adjacent hole to the left. Take your needle back down the central hole. Try to split the floss you are using when doing so. The next step is to bring your needle up through the adjacent hole to the right. Finally, take your needle back down the central hole. Try to split the floss again. Give your thread a gentle tug. This will lock your stitch into place. Snip off the tail. You are now ready to stitch over the pin stitch. Before the invention of marking inks, cross stitches were used to mark household linens with the owner's name. The task was often given to children to do, and no girl was considered proficient with her needle until she could work all the letters of the alphabet. This did not mean that she was able to read or write. The cross stitch or marking stitch is the most popular stitch used in samplers. There are 8 different ways that you can lay a cross stitch. There isn't a right or wrong way. The important thing is to remember that the top stitch should always lay in the same direction for a neat and uniform finish. The stitch can be worked over any number of threads, the most common being over 2 threads. To finish, turn your work over and bury your thread under some of the stitches laid. As an extra precaution, you can reverse and take your needle under one more stitch before snipping off the thread. This will give you extra anchorage. Let's look at some of the alternative ways you can work a pin stitch, a cross stitch, and finish your thread. We can work a pin stitch on the horizontal so that it forms the first leg of your cross stitch. If you lay the top stitch over the pin stitch, you will have worked a complete cross stitch. We will now work our cross stitches by laying a row of single stitches. This is the first leg of your cross stitch. When we get to the end of the row, we will reverse and work our way back, laying the top leg of the cross stitch. If the thread you are using provides good coverage on your fabric, you can finish your thread by burying it under the front of your cross stitches. If your thread is giving sparse coverage, this will not work as the thread will show through. On schoolgirl samplers, we often see verses, dedications and motifs worked in cross stitch over one thread. Needleworkers are often deterred from working cross-stitch over 1. It is the same stitch as cross-stitch over 2. It takes no more effort. It is made up of the same 2 diagonal stitches. You have to be careful not to pull the thread through the intersection of the woven linen. The warp and weft fibres are not locked at the intersections. They simply pass over and under one another. As a result, when stitching over one thread, some stitches can slip and disappear. If you lay your stitches away from the direction you are working in, it will prevent the stitches slipping under the intersections. A good magnifier will help you see the small stitches. If your over 1 cross stitches are not sitting well, if they looked squashed in, then the floss you are using is too thick. Try changing to a finer thread just for the over 1 cross stitches. This can be a game changer. In this demonstration, I am working on 36 count linen using Auvert Soie's Soie d'Alger. I have changed to a finer thread, the blue thread. It is Soie 103. If I was stitching my sampler, say on 46 and 56 count fabric using Auvert Soie's Soie 103, when working cross stitch over 1, I could change to Soie Saphine as it is a finer thread again. Can you see that the over 1 cross stitches worked in blue are sitting much better than the ones worked in red? They are not pushing against the surrounding stitches or the woven threads of the linen. Nothing is ever cast in stone with needlework. You have to think out of the box and try different methods. You can always revert back to your tried and trusted method. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. The most important thing to remember with your stitching is that it should be enjoyable.